Is it? Alhamdulillah. نبدأ. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So inshallah ta'ala we'll be continuing our discussion of the book Muqtasar Sahih Bukhari by Zabidi rahimahullah. So in the last lesson that we had, we were still discussing Kitab al-Salah and discussing different chapters relating to matters that cover different aspects of the Salat. So we'll be picking up from the hadith that we have left off last week, where the author rahimahullah, we discussed concerning matters pertaining to when the Prophet ﷺ established the masjid and that they removed those graves that was at this location, and then they established the masjid. So the hadith that follows next, inshallah ta'ala, as-salat fi mawadi' al-ibl. So we're picking up from that hadith and the benefit that can be taken from the hadith to be mentioned. Tafaddal.
Alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. From the Kitab al-Salah, the book of the prayer. Chapter 34, to offer the prayer in the camel yards, the places where the camels are stationed. Hadith number 273, narrated Nafi', I saw Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma offering as-salah, the prayer, while taking his camel as a sutra in front of him, and he said, I saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam doing the same.
So the author rahimahullah, he mentioned this particular hadith which is concerning matters that relate to as-salat fil mawadi' al-ibl. So praying. So they discussed concerning what is intended by Imam Bukhari rahimahullah when he mentioned this particular chapter heading as-salat fi mawadi' al-ibl. So they mentioned that either he intend, or what is intended, either bayan hukum as-salat. So what's the ruling pertaining to salat in this particular place, which is the place, the station of or the places of the camel. Or they mention bayan is to clarify what's the position of Islam or the Sharia position regarding praying in such places, with the places where the ibl or the camel that they rest. Then he mentioned the hadith or the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, or he mentioned the author and then the hadith of Ibn Umar. They mentioned in the book there An-Nafi' and Ibn Umar. So he mentioned An-Nafi' and Ibn Umar. He mentioned أنه كان يصلي على بئير. That he mentioned that Ibn Umar anhu, that he used to pray on his camel. So they mentioned regarding concerning what is intended by أنه كان يصلي على بئير, that he used to pray on his camel. So this is something which is one, it is allowed for a person to pray on their camel. Regarding the salat, which is a salat an-nafila within a compulsory salat, so the permissible, so this shows, or it could give the meaning regarding that, yusalli ala bahiri, that he prayed towards the ba'ir that he used as a sutra is camel. So they mentioned that you could have those two meanings regarding concerning that Ibn Umar, that he prayed towards the ba'ir, which is the camel. Then they kind of somewhat also discuss that the relationship between the chapter heading and the hadith that is mentioned. So they mentioned regarding the chapter heading as-salat fi mawadi' al-ibl. So praying in the places, or what's the hukum, what's the ruling pertaining to praying in places where camel live, or the camel pen. Or so as for the hadith that is mentioned, it doesn't per se both that the chapter heading does not coincide with the hadith that is mentioned. So said the chapter heading is regarding praying where, in places where it's a camel pens. But as for the hadith that is mentioned regarding this matter, that is somewhat it discussed concerning أنه كان يصلي على بعيري, that Ibn Umar, that he used to pray on top of his ba'ir, his camel. So there's no clear relationship between the chapter heading and the hadith mentioned. So Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, and most part, that he tries to make a relationship or connection between both. But that sometimes can be difficult to make that connection. And sometimes it's ijtihad regarding that connection. Then after they mentioned Ibn Umar qala ra'aytu Nabi alayhi salam yaf'alu, that he said the Prophet alayhi salam, I saw the Prophet alayhi salam that he did this, which is praying on top of his camel. So he said, no, I saw the Prophet ﷺ that he did this, which is he did what I just did. So I mentioned that as for the general benefit of the hadith, so I said that the connection between the hadith and the chapter heading is somewhat not direct, if you might say, not direct, but they mention that indirectly concerning to know that it could mean al-bahiri, praying in the places where the camel lives. As for the benefits that can be taken from hadith 1, jawaz, it showed the permissibility of salat al-nafila ala ad-daba, that it showed the permissibility for one to pray on top of the amount which is be the camel in this case. So it showed the permissibility of the person praying a nafila salat while in travel, or nafila salat while he's in motion on his mount. Well, that could be at times then that their mode of travel was camel. Today some people might do the same thing regarding a cow, or a motor vehicle, or other things that are used. So it showed the permissibility of this. It showed the permissibility of this. Then also it shows regarding concerning that Ibn Omar anhuma, that his action when he was asked, he kind of somewhat mentioned as a dalil that the reason why he was doing so because he was following the Prophet of Islam regarding he did this, so I'm doing the same. So it showed the Sahaba that they were very keen regarding the things that they did, that they have evidence or a proof for what they did. So what he did, so it showed that that keenness regarding the Sahaba in front of the Sunnah of the Prophet of Islam, that they always tried to imitate his actions and did the things that he did. Then also from the hadith it shows regarding, that regarding the Sahaba keenness regarding ittiba' as-sunnah, even things that they saw the Prophet of Islam did, they just copied or they followed, without per se going into detail. So the Prophet of Islam did something that was sufficient enough for them to follow that practice. Then whether to ask what he did, what is his wajib, what is his sunnah, the fact that the Prophet of Islam did it, that was sufficient for them, or evidence enough for them to follow him on that practice. Also from the hadith it shows regarding that that the Sahaba regarding concerning, they didn't at times make distinction at times regarding that. They would follow the Prophet of Islam, whether things that they saw him did, they would just follow, or things that he told them to do. So the Sahaba was very keen regarding whatever the Prophet of Islam did, that was sufficient, whether he spoke and give them instruction to follow that act, or things that they just saw him did, that was sufficient for them to follow that practice. Not like us today. We make distinction about this, whether things is qawliya or fi'liya. For the Sahaba, whether he said or did something, that was sufficient enough evidence for them to adapt that practice. Also from this they mention a discussion between the ulama that regarding concerning al-ba'iri, that in some narration mention al-ba'ir, that was it the ba'ir, was it used as a sutra or not? Some discuss regarding concerning whether concerning this ba'ir was used as a sutra, but if that was the case, it shows regarding that at time the Prophet of Islam, he would use different form of sutra regarding that object that is placed in front of the person in salah. So it's an object that is placed, the sutra is an object that is placed in front of the person who is praying is salat, that to stop people from going in between him and is in front of his salat. So the sutra, so mentioned also the Prophet ﷺ at times use ba'ir or animals as a sutra, at times a person is even a wife is female, and different objects, at times a spear, so different objects or things were used as a sutra. Different things that were used as sutra. So sutra is not fixed to one particular thing. So different things can be used as a sutra. That also next matter regarding the sutra to maybe discuss later in detail, or to be discussed, or if not discussed before, between the ulama regarding use as a sutra, the hukum as sutra. So instead of sutra, is that when a person prays that he should have something in front of him. Is it something which is wajib or not wajib? That a person should, is that must to have a sutra whenever one is praying? What about we have the imam or the munfarid? So the sutra, it applies to the imam, or it applies to the person who's munfarid, the person who's praying by himself. It's a must that one should have a sutra, and the rule applies to a male and a female. So we have jumhur of the ulama, And the ulama mentioned regarding A'immat al-Arba that having a sutra is sunnah mu'akkada. But of the ulama who mention it is wajib. Of the ulama who mention is wajib. So there is a khilaf between the ulama regarding placing that sutra is wajib or not. Khilaf between the ulama. And either we have maybe have cited this matter before or to be discussed further inshallah ta'ala. So the general thing regarding having a sutra is a part of the show the permissibility or the that is legislated and allowed for a person to have a sutra whenever he or her is praying. And that will apply to the imam or a person praying by themselves. Also, it showed that the Sahaba are very keen regarding observing the Prophet regarding his salah and the way that he would pray. So Ibn Omar kind of somewhat observed that he would pray on his ba'ir or pray towards his ba'ir. So kind of somewhat observe these things. So it showed that they were very keen regarding the Prophet regarding him and his salat, which showed that we should be the same. That we should also be very keen regarding matters pertaining to our salat. That is prayed in the best manner possible. And at some time we find that we may have our own shortcomings. So you have different regarding concerning that the way that we pray the salat. At times we may have our own shortcoming, but for the person for the Muslim, that regarding the importance of salat, that at least once a year that a person read a book on salah. At least once a year. Comes that it's the second act or the first act that is required from us after shahada. The first act of ibadah. The most important act after the salat that we can perform, the shahada that we can perform is what? The salah. The first one will be questioned about. So the Muslim should be very keen regarding knowing exactly how to perform this act of salah. As the Prophet ﷺ performed it. So I said that at least once, that once a year, a person finds a book which is muqtasar regarding the salat, sifatul salat of the Prophet ﷺ, and you have many books of that type. You have many books of that type regarding how to pray. So being very mindful regarding the salat and also knowing the ahkam that relates to as-salat. And also it shows regarding that Ibn Omar, that Nafi, when he observed that he thinks that he somewhat questioned Ibn Omar as regarding his practice. So it shows regarding the Muslim, even concerning that a person who observed that an alim, a person of ilm, doing something that if you wish then to follow that alim on that thing, then seeking of dalil. So the fact that the alim did something, it doesn't mean that you just take it without a dalil. So asking the alim, a person of ilm, if you want to follow them in an act, that the person should seek of dalil regarding the act, and also the alim presenting dalil regarding certain things that he have done if asked, and better yet, it is produced when asked. So that's concerning what can be taken from this particular hadith. أيوة الذي بعد.
Hadith from chapter number 35. Whoever offered the salah, the prayer, with furnace or fire or any other worshipable thing in front of him, but he intended the salah solely for Allah. Hadith number 274, narrated Anas radiallahu anhu, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, while I was offering a salah, the hellfire was displayed in front of me. Number 1, chapter 51, the book of Salah.
Before we go to the next hadith, we're going to somewhat add a next point regarding this particular the hadith of Ibn Umar that is mentioned regarding as-salat fi mawadi' al-ibl, that the ulama also discussed regarding that what's the hukum in performing salat in the place or the pen of the ibl, which is the camel. So the place that the camel rests, what's the hukum in praying in such places. You have some hadith that mentions, or there's hadith that give the meaning to something which is not allowed. So kind of somewhat ulama, you have different hadiths. So you have Shaykh Al-Raji, Hafidullah, that he kind of somewhat mentioned regarding concerning that as for this matter, regarding the hukum of praying in places or the camel pen, what's the ruling regarding that? He mentioned Filipi Tafsil. There's a discussion on this or some clarity on this matter. So he mentioned the first case regarding praying in places of the camel pen, that if it's the place where they actually lives, That's the place that they live, or their pen that they're there permanently, or spend a lot of time in that place, then regarding concerning praying there, it's not allowed. So the place that the camel actually lives, or his pen that he there most of the time, that he will go out and come back and sleep. That's like his main place of abode. Then praying there, it is not allowed. Then they mentioned that, so that's concerned the first scenario. Then of the ulama who mentioned it is somewhat allowed, but is makruh. Then you have the next matter discussed regarding that praying in the area where the camel somewhat he may rest there, is not his place that he would be there permanently or for a long time. So that's there for a short time. So for example, the person that may be the shepherd with the camel, that may be taken from one location to another, but on the journey they may stop for a little while and then continue. That if was to pray in that area where the camel is, that's not a problem. But when it reaches his pen, his place that he actually lived, the camel, then it is not allowed to pray in that area. But as for on the place that he will rest and maybe drink and then move on, then it is allowed to pray as long as the area is clean. So as long as that area is clean, so that's concerning what he mentions. Allahu Alam. So of the point that I mentioned regarding concerning that, next point, that in the book that we have here, and this book is the old print of this book, that when I mentioned it, because when I mentioned it, Imam mentioned, أنه كان يصلي على بعيري. كان يصلي على, so I use the word ala. In Sahih Bukhari itself, so this book is the Muqtasar that we are using. As for the book, Sahih Bukhari, that it mentions ila ba'iri. So there's two differences. So in the one that I have as the main book, which is the Muqtasar, which is that Muqtasar needs some kind of somewhat editing. It needs editing, means some. But as for the hadith mentioned ila, meaning towards. But as for the one that is mentioned in the Muqtasar, the summary mentioned ala, which means that he prayed on his bahir. But as for the one in Bukhari, mentioned ila bahiri. So ila bahir means that he used it as a sutra. Clear? So at times, as we mentioned before, regarding concerning the books of the ulama, that Muqtasarat, books that are summary, at times is best, especially concerning this particular summary that we are using, hasn't been gone through the process of a proper checking and verification. Clear? So we're using a print regarding Muqtasar Sahih Zabidi. This particular print hasn't gone through a proper checking and editing. By way of going back to the original manuscript to verify the wordings and verify the material. So at times it may be more prone for error. So show that we're going concerning certain things that always store, like of the rules of verification and checking, will be that every hadith is mentioned goes back to the original hadith. Go back to the original hadith to ensure that the word that is mentioned in the Muqtasar, that it coincides with what is mentioned in the original text. As sometimes that, like Zabidi rahimahullah, that came later on, that at times may make some error, or the manuscript of error, or the khatib, or the nasikh, the person who wrote the book, that he made some error. So it's always of the rules of checking that the person go back to the original. So even if the Muqtasar have an error, you will highlight it in the footnotes. But those are different rules regarding checking and verification of books. So that's concerning that matter. Aywa. So I said that now if Bukhari rahimahullah mentioned ila ba'iri, then what is meant concerning that praying in that area that the camel has rested. So kind of somewhat then it kind of somewhat coincide to some degree, indirectly. Aywa, regarding the chapter heading and the hadith that is mentioned. Aywa. Oh, you mentioned, okay, sorry, I went back to the first hadith. Okay, you mentioned, so back to, okay, let's quickly read through the, refresh the hadith.
Now, from chapter number 35, whoever offered the salah with a furnace or fire or any other worshipable thing in front of him, but he attended the salah solely for Allah, Hadith number 274, narrated Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anh. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, while I was offering as-salah, the hellfire was displayed in front of me.
So the mention regarding concern. So the next ayah regarding man salla wa qudamahu tannur aw nar aw shay'in mimma yu'bad fa'arada bihi Allah. So kind of somewhat, this particular heading is somewhat, it goes into two parts. Now the heading that is mentioned by Imam Bukhari, or the heading that is mentioned here in this Muqtasar, it can be divided into two parts. So regarding concern that one, that Imam Bukhari they didn't mention concerns the hukum or clarity regarding praying towards or something being in front of you, that is something of either a nar or tannur, which would be a furnace that they bake things in. So a furnace which is fire inside, or a nar which is fire, or shay, or something mimma yu'bud, or something that is worship. So meaning that a person praying towards something that is in front of you as like a sutra. So something in front of you, but that thing could be maybe a fire, and that fire is something that was said that in general that there are those people who worship fire. Or it could be another object, and that object is somewhat worshipped by others. So what's the rule regarding praying towards something that is taken as an object of worship in some way or another by others? So the permissibility, is this allowed or not? Then I mentioned, kind of somewhat to put some clarification, فَأَرَادَ بِهِ Allah. But the person who's praying towards that thing, he within his intention is praying for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he's not praying the intention of praying to the fire or for the fire, but he's praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he happens to be in front of a object that is, or thing that fire or the likes. What's the state of such a person's salah? What's the state of such a person's salat? And for the person who prays towards a nar or any object for the sake of that object, and that is shirk or kufr. So a person who prays in front of an object, whatever it may be, for the sake of that object, a nar as a fire worshipper, or pray in front of a cross with a person on it, if he is doing so for that thing, for that reason, then that is kufr or shirk. Salatu batil. His salat is invalid. So we have the next case with a person who may be praying in certain things that, as explicitly said regarding concerning a nar or a furnace that as fire or used for or something else, but his intention that he's praying for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, a scenario that one is in the countryside camping, and it's dark out in the woods. So there's a fire, a campfire. So you're praying close to the fire. The fire is there, and you're praying in front of the fire, based upon you want that light. You with me? So you might have something as a sutra, but the fire is still in front of you. You're praying right there in front of the fire. But you have put a sutra or whatever object, but the fire is immediately in front of you. But so in that case, the person, that salat is allowed, because the person's intention is not for the fire. It's because of, in that case, the person wants to be the light that is there. So the person's intention have nothing. So his intention has no relation with the fire. The fire is just there for the light. Or the person may be in his house, and he has a furnace. He has a furnace. So he's praying out in his living room, as some house may have a furnace, if they still work. They still work in England, unless you're rich. So the person have a furnace in his house, and he's praying in his house, and he's in just, because of the space he's praying, but the furnace in front of him. But his intention, it has nothing, his salat have nothing to do with the furnace, or praying towards the furnace or the fire there. It's for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it just so happened that he's praying and this thing is in front of him. The person's salat is valid. That salat is valid. So they mentioned that, so regarding concern that, then they mentioned the hadith of Anas anhu regarding the Prophet alayhi salam, uridat alayya an-nar wa ana usalli. They mentioned as the footnotes regarding concern that Imam, the author of this Muqtasar, Zabidi rahimahullah, that when he put together this particular Muqtasar, this summary of Sahih Bukhari, he had certain condition and followed certain rules that he put in place. So of the rules that you have in place regarding concerning this particular muqtasar, that he only use ahadith that are mawsula marfu'ah, a hadith that goes back direct to the Prophet Islam and as a full chain. As for this narration that he mentioned, Anas, it is mu'allaka, so it doesn't have a full chain. The one that comes, the narration that comes with a full chain, they said muttasil, with a full connected chain, going back to the Prophet that mentioned, uridat alayya al-jannah wal-nar. Uridat alayya al-jannah wal-nar. So the more, the narration that be more in line with Zabid rahimullah condition of this hadith is the hadith I'll mention, which is also in Bukhari. So Bukhari rahimullah mentions hadith, one with a mu'allaka isnad, which comes to a term you are ulama of hadith, and of the science of ilm hadith regarding a chain which is broken by way of the author. So mu'allaka is like a terminology used by the ulama of hadith, indicating that that isnad is not a connected full isnad, is actually a portion of an isnad, but the breakage, disconnection, it occurs from the side of the author of the book. With me? Okay, no problem. If you so then this narration, it comes muallaka with a broken chain. But the correct, the unbroken chain, the muttasil chain, there is, and also inside Bukhari, but the wording of that hadith mentioned, uridat alayya al-jannah wal-nar. So it mentioned both jannah and nar. This narration only mentioned an-nar. So they mentioned that this hadith somewhat, but from the hadith they mentioned regarding concerning, so as for the hadith, that it can somewhat, it shows regarding the Prophet Islam that he prayed and in front of him was placed a nar. That nar was not, there's a real to the Prophet Islam, but was not seen by those praying with him. So the nar was real to the Prophet Islam that was placed in front of him while he was in salah. But as for those behind, they did not see. Now, I said that was a form of, said to use the word, a miracle that occurred where? That an-nar jahannam wal jannah. So the Prophet Islam, that he saw that nar while he was in salah. So they mentioned that no, he was praying, but was placed there not by his choice, but was placed, but he still considered his salat and did not repeat his salah. So that's the shahid. That's the main point, that he still prayed his salah, even though the nar was placed there, real to him, but not seen by others. So from this they mentioned that it showed that one, regarding the hadith, it shows regarding the al-nabuwah, concerning that the sign of prophethood, meaning concerning a miracle occur with the Prophet Islam, that he saw a glimpse of an-nar wal jannah, where both are created objects. So they are both created regarding an-nar, a jannah. Feed my man, he's coming. Yeah.
That's not my job.
Call him though. And also from the hadith, also they mentioned the hadith, the Prophet Islam also regarding concerning that, also regarding that, Adam tashabbab al-kuffar, regarding concerning the hadith, that for the Muslim to avoid imitating and adopting things that are popular with the kuffar. So things that become somewhat known with the kuffar by way of their ways, their way of all their worship, and things that are become particular, synonymous with the kuffar, for the Muslim to avoid those things. So things that I've said become trend, even things related to there are things that are trend with the kuffar, for the Muslim to avoid those things. And even concerning people, the mushrik and the likes, to avoid their practice, even the things of their worship that they are involved in, to avoid imitating the kuffar in their worship and also in their lifestyle that does not go in that are not in conformity with Islam. Also, it shows regarding the Muslim that tadhkir bi umur akhirah. Also, the hadith also showed regarding that the Muslim that to be mindful of things of the akhirah. So the Prophet Islam concerned an-nar as a reminder regarding concerning things of the akhirah. So for the person that to be mindful regarding al-akhirah, even in salah. That these are the things for the Muslim to always be mindful of, things of al-nar wal-jannah, and these are things that relates to the akhirah. For the Muslim to be mindful of these things regarding being mindful of an-nar, to uphold his salat, and those things that are upon the Muslim to uphold and to establish, and for the Muslim to avoid those things that are haram upon him and err. What? So that inshallah ta'ala, that's so we stop there inshallah ta'ala, and we'll continue next week with the remaining hadith, or continuation of the hadith of this particular chapter that is mentioned in this muqtasar of Zabidi rahimahullah. So that inshallah ta'ala will end. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذا السبيل والآخر الحمد لله العالمين. السلام عليكم.
On the weapons on the socks.
Wiping?
On the socks.
Wiping on the socks.
Yeah. So when you go to water, you do once, or I see some people do once and once. Which one is the correct?
With the same hand.
Yeah.
So the person said that both hands they should be wiped with a damp hand.
But it has to be at the same time, or they can do it?
I mean the same time. No, they can be instead of not necessarily have to be done at the same time.
Okay.
Can do one, then the other. You can do one and the other. Khilaf between the ulama, that should a person do the right, then the left, or do both at the same time. Khilaf, they said no, that khilaf is just in afdaliyah, what is best. But as for both of them have to be wiped, as for whether to be done simultaneous or to be done one after the other, then that's open. Hey.